Sagittarius. The trap ends where you choose yourself first. Dear Sagittarius, there is a moment, often so quiet you could almost miss it, when something inside you begins to shift. It is not the moment of heartbreak or betrayal that shakes you awake. It's subtler than that. It happens in the stillness, in the middle of an ordinary day, when you suddenly realize that the cost of shrinking yourself to fit into someone else's comfort zone has become heavier than the fear of walking alone. For so long you've been the one who bends, who softens, who smooths the edges so others can rest easily around you. You've told yourself this was kindness, loyalty, love, and perhaps it was in the beginning. But over time, this well-meaning habit has become a quiet trap, one you built for yourself without even realizing it. You've convinced yourself that staying small was a way to keep the peace, but what if that peace is only silence? The kind that swallows your laughter, your dreams, your spark? This moment, this gentle awakening, is where everything changes. Not because someone else frees you, but because you decide to choose yourself first, to step back into your own center, to remember the size of your light and the truth of your own rhythm. So stay with me until the very end of this message, my dear Sagittarius. And if these words already feel like they're speaking directly to your heart, I invite you to like, share, and subscribe, not just for me, but so you never forget to return to yourself again. Gate 1: When enough becomes too little. Sagittarius, you've always been generous with your space. In your heart, in your life, even in the dreams you hold. You are the kind of soul who can make room for others without hesitation. When you love someone, whether it's a friend, a partner, or even a colleague, you instinctively want them to feel safe with you. And so you bend, you accommodate, you adapt. One compromise here, another there. First, it feels harmless. A small change in your routine to make someone else more comfortable. A moment of holding your tongue to avoid starting a disagreement. A silent decision to delay your own plans because someone you care about isn't ready to move forward. And maybe in the beginning this feels noble. After all, you tell yourself, isn't this what connection is about? Meeting in the middle? Supporting each other through the seasons of life? You convince yourself that giving up a little isn't really giving up. It's love in action. And for a while it works. The relationship stays smooth, the air stays calm, and you take quiet pride in being the one who can absorb the tension before it turns into conflict. But here's the thing about compromise: when it's always one-sided, it doesn't just adjust your path, it begins to erase it. Every time you choose their comfort over your truth, you take one small step away from yourself. It's so gradual, so quiet you barely notice at first. Like a candle being slowly turned down until the flame is just a flicker. You still see the light, so you convince yourself it's fine, but it no longer warms you the way it once did. I've seen this pattern play out in countless Sagittarius hearts. There's Maya, a vibrant woman who once had dreams of starting her own business. She was known for her bold ideas and her unstoppable energy, but after getting into a long-term relationship, she found herself constantly deferring her ambitions because her partner wasn't ready for the instability that came with entrepreneurship. At first, she told herself she was just being patient, but 1 year turned into 5, and somewhere along the way she stopped even talking about her dream. It wasn't that her partner demanded she give it up. It was that she learned to keep quiet, to avoid the subtle tension that arose whenever she spoke about growth. By the time she realized it, the habit of shrinking had become her default. Sagittarius, you are a sign of expansion, of big skies and far horizons. But when keeping the peace becomes more important than honoring your truth, you start to live in a much smaller world than the one you were born for. This is the danger of enough. It tricks you into thinking stability is the same as fulfillment. But they are not the same. Stability without growth is like standing on a ship anchored in a safe harbor. You're not sinking, but you're also not sailing anywhere. You might tell yourself it's temporary, that you'll pick your dreams back up when the timing is better, when the people you love are more ready, when life feels less complicated. But the truth? That better time rarely arrives. Life will always present you with reasons to wait, and people who would prefer you to stay right where you are. Not out of malice, but because your movement demands theirs, and not everyone is willing to move. What's tricky is that you can't even fully resent them. They may genuinely care for you. They may believe they're protecting you from risk or disappointment. And in some ways, they might be. But protection is not the same as freedom. Sometimes, in trying to keep you safe, people unintentionally keep you small. And because you value loyalty and harmony so deeply, you don't push back. But here's the truth, Sagittarius. The life you want is not built from just enough. It is built from the unapologetic pursuit of what sets your soul on fire. If you are always negotiating with yourself, always making your dreams palatable for others, you will wake up one day realizing that you've spent more years maintaining comfort than creating joy. And comfort without joy is not peace. It is quiet resignation. Think of it this way. Imagine you own a vast, beautiful garden. You could grow towering sunflowers, wild roses, fragrant herbs. But because you're afraid of what the neighbors might think, you plant only a few small flowers in neat rows, careful not to draw too much attention. First it seems fine. The garden is tidy, easy to maintain. But over time the soil grows restless. Weeds creep in where life is stagnant. And one day, you look out and realize that you've wasted fertile ground simply because you were afraid to let it bloom. Sagittarius, your spirit is that garden. It needs space, light, and the freedom to grow without apology. If you've been living in just enough for too long, it's time to admit that this version of peace is costing you far too much. And the first step out of this trap is recognizing that you've been in it at all. That's the power of awareness. Once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. You can no longer pretend that shrinking is the same as loving, or that silence is the same as kindness. The moment you choose to honor your full truth, even if it disrupts the comfort of others, you begin to reclaim the parts of yourself you've been quietly setting aside. This doesn't mean abandoning compassion or loyalty. It means including yourself in the circle of people you protect and nurture. Because if you keep giving away the best of yourself to keep others at ease, there will come a day when you look for your own reflection and see only the version of you that they preferred, not the one you were born to be. And Sagittarius, I promise you this. The people who truly love you will not leave because you decide to grow. They will adjust, adapt, and perhaps even be inspired to grow alongside you. But the ones who can only love you in your smaller form, their discomfort is not your burden to carry. Gate 2. When silence stops being a safe choice. Sagittarius, for so long, you may have told yourself that silence is wisdom, that biting your tongue is a form of maturity, that not rocking the boat is the loving thing to do. And in certain moments it is. There are times when holding back your words protects a fragile moment, gives space for emotions to settle, or prevents a wound from deepening. But the problem begins when silence stops being a choice you make and becomes a role you play. When keeping the peace shifts from an intentional act to an unconscious habit, it no longer serves love, it serves fear. Fear of being misunderstood. Fear of being seen as too much. Fear of disappointing the people whose approval has become a quiet currency in your life. And perhaps most painfully, fear of realizing that the people you've been protecting with your silence might not actually accept you in your fullness. The danger of this kind of silence is that it doesn't just hide your words, it hides you. Over time, you begin to edit yourself before you even speak. You anticipate reactions before they happen, and in doing so, you filter out the parts of you that might feel too raw, too loud, or too ambitious for the comfort of others. And without realizing it, you start performing a softer, safer version of yourself, one that fits neatly into the boundaries they're comfortable with, even if it means cutting away parts of who you truly are. I think of Leo, a Sagittarius client I once worked with. He had a deep love for music and used to write songs that were vulnerable, political, and raw. But when he joined a band, the other members preferred safer, more marketable tracks. At first, Leo agreed to compromise for the sake of the group's unity, but soon he stopped bringing his real lyrics at all. He convinced himself it wasn't worth the tension. Years later, he told me, "I don't even know if I can write like that anymore. I've been quiet for too long." That's the quiet tragedy of self-silencing. It doesn't just keep others from hearing you. It teaches you to stop listening to yourself. Your truth becomes faint, not because it's gone, but because you've trained yourself to tune it out. And Sagittarius, you more than anyone know that this goes against your nature. You are ruled by Jupiter, the planet of expansion, truth, and exploration. You thrive when your voice carries across wide spaces, when your vision isn't just seen but shared. For you, truth isn't a weapon, it's a bridge. But when you shrink your truth to avoid conflict, you stop building those bridges. You start building walls. It's easy to convince yourself that this is kindness, that you're avoiding unnecessary arguments or preserving harmony. But real harmony can only exist where the truth is welcome. Anything else is just a fragile arrangement, one that requires you to carry the weight of constant self-monitoring. And that's not love, that's emotional labor disguised as devotion. Imagine a house where every window has been shut for years. At first it feels safe, no wind to rattle the frames, no cold drafts. But slowly the air grows stale. Dusk gathers. The sunlight dims. You forget the feeling of fresh air filling your lungs. And then one day you crack a window open, and the rush of wind feels shocking. You cough. You sneeze. Someone complains about the chill. But deep inside, you know, this is what the room needed all along. This is what you needed all along. Speaking your truth after a long silence is like opening that window. It might stir discomfort at first, in you, and in those who have grown used to your quiet compliance. But discomfort is not danger. Discomfort is growth knocking at the door. This is not about becoming reckless with your words or disregarding the feelings of others. It's about remembering that your voice matters in the equation of love. It's about realizing that your needs, your dreams, and your boundaries are not obstacles to connection. They are the foundation of it. Because if a relationship cannot hold space for your truth, then what it's holding space for is not really you. Sagittarius, here's the hardest truth. Sometimes, the silence you think is protecting the relationship is actually weakening it. People may believe they know you, but if they only know the version of you that's been edited for their comfort, they are loving an image, not the living, breathing reality. And you deserve to be loved in your reality. It's not easy to break this pattern. The first time you say no when you used to say yes, you might feel the air shift in the room. The first time you speak your dream aloud, someone might flinch. But each time you choose your voice over your silence, you teach yourself that you can survive the reactions of others. You learn that their discomfort does not equal your danger. And that realization, that's freedom. So I invite you to ask yourself, where have I been quiet for too long? What have I been swallowing back, telling myself it's not the right time? And most importantly, if not now, when? The truth is, Sagittarius, you don't need to wait for permission to open the window. You are the fresh air. And the spaces that truly deserve you will welcome the breeze, even if it means rearranging a few things to let the light back in. Gate 3. When truth becomes your new standard. There comes a point, Sagittarius, when you can no longer pretend that half-truths and polite fictions are enough to nourish your soul. After a long period of staying quiet, of trimming yourself down to fit the frame of someone else's comfort, you start to feel the weight of your own absence. The room may still be full, the conversations may still flow, but something vital is missing you, and the absence of your truth becomes impossible to ignore. When you first start reclaiming your voice, it feels like walking into a room where the furniture has been rearranged. Familiar, but different. You stand there, unsure where to step. Your old patterns whisper, don't make it too loud, don't make it too much. But there's another voice rising now, clearer and stronger. If I am here, I will be fully here. This is when your truth stops being negotiable. Not because you want to hurt anyone, but because you realize that love without honesty is just a performance. And Sagittarius, you've never been built for performance. You've been built for adventure, for meeting the world with your whole, unedited self. I remember a Sagittarius woman named Marin who came to me after ending a decade-long friendship. From the outside, nothing looked wrong. They still met for coffee, still exchanged birthday gifts. But every time Marin spoke about her new business ideas, her friend's smile would tighten, her responses clipped. I realized, Marin told me, that she only really celebrated me when I was struggling. Once I started thriving, she couldn't meet me there. It was a painful recognition, but it became her turning point. She stopped prioritizing connection at the cost of her expansion. And this is the crux of Gate 3. It's not about cutting people off impulsively. It's about filtering your relationships through a new lens. The question is no longer simply, do they love me? But do they love me as I am now? Do they love the person I am becoming? And if the answer is no, you give yourself permission to let them stay in your history, rather than your present. It's not an easy shift. There will be moments when you miss the comfort of the familiar, when you find yourself reaching back toward the old version of yourself just to make someone else feel at ease. But each time you choose to honor your current self, you reinforce the truth that your growth is not negotiable. Think of it like climbing a mountain. Along the way, you may have companions who are perfect for the lower trails, the easy hikes, the picnic spots, the gentle slopes. But as the path steepens and the air thins, not everyone will want to go higher. Some will stop and tell you, "It's far enough. You've done enough." And you could stay with them, but then you'd never see the view you've been chasing. For Sagittarius, this is not just metaphor. It's your nature. You are here to keep climbing, to keep seeking the higher vantage point, the broader horizon. To stay still in order to make others comfortable is to deny your most essential instinct. The real revelation of Gate 3 is that truth doesn't just protect your own integrity. It also clarifies who truly belongs in your life. When you speak openly about your dreams, your fears, your boundaries, and someone leans in instead of pulling away, that's when you know you've found a companion for the summit. And when someone withdraws, you learn to see it not as rejection, but as information. They are telling you where their journey ends. And that's okay. Not every path is meant to be walked together. But here's something you might not expect. When you commit to your truth, you will also inspire others to do the same. I've seen it happen again and again with Sagittarius clients. The moment they stop apologizing for their light, the people around them start reconsidering their own self-silencing. It's as if your courage gives them permission to re-enter their own authenticity. And in that way, your truth becomes more than personal. It becomes contagious. Still, there will be losses. There's no point sugarcoating it. Some people will quietly fade. Some will openly resist your shift. But the relationships that remain, the ones that thrive in the presence of your full self, will feel richer, more nourishing, and more alive than any connection you've had in the muted days of your silence. Your truth becomes your new standard not because you've hardened, but because you've softened in the right way, softened into alignment with yourself. You stop bending into shapes that hurt your spine. You stop twisting your words into palatable fragments. You stop negotiating away the parts of you that feel inconvenient to someone else's comfort. This is not rebellion for rebellion's sake. It is restoration. It is the moment you stop looking for safe spaces outside yourself and realize the safest space you can ever stand in is your own honesty. Sagittarius, you've always been the archer. Your arrow aims for far horizons, for meaning, for the places where truth feels like oxygen. In Gate 3, you reclaim the bow. You take the shot, knowing that not everyone will follow where your arrow lands. And that's not a loss. It's the natural unfolding of your path. Because once truth becomes your standard, you can never again trade it for the illusion of harmony. Gate 4. The beginning of a self-chosen journey. There's a quiet, almost imperceptible shift that happens when you stop waiting for permission to live the life you want. It's not dramatic. There's no lightning strike, no applause, no cinematic soundtrack. It happens in the stillness, in the moment you realize you've been holding the keys to your own freedom the entire time. And Sagittarius, in Gate 4, this is exactly where you find yourself, standing before the open door, not because someone else unlocked it, but because you finally turned the key. The beauty of this stage is that it doesn't start with action. It starts with the decision. You decide that your joy is worth pursuing even if it disrupts the status quo. You decide that your dreams deserve daylight, not the dim corner you've been tucking them into. You decide that the discomfort of growth is a fair price for the exhilaration of living fully. I once spoke with a Sagittarius man named Eli who had spent years building a career that looked perfect on paper, but felt like a cage in reality. He didn't hate it. In fact, it paid well, and everyone praised him for his stability. But deep down, he was starving for something more adventurous, more alive. For years, he told himself it wasn't the right time to change. Too risky, too disruptive, too selfish. But one day, after a quiet morning run, he said to himself, if not now, then when? Within 6 months, he had transitioned into a field that aligned with his values and allowed him to travel. And he told me the hardest part wasn't the career change itself. It was deciding to choose himself first. This is the essence of Gate 4. You stop waiting for the right moment, the perfect alignment, or the unanimous approval of others. You begin to see that the only real green light you've ever needed is the one you give yourself. Of course, there's fear here. Choosing yourself is not the easy road. It means facing the possibility that some people won't understand your choices. It means risking the stability of the known for the uncertainty of the new. But Sagittarius, you are a seeker by nature. Your soul was never meant to stay in one place just because it feels safe. In this phase, your relationship with freedom changes. In the past, you may have seen freedom as something granted, a privilege someone could allow or deny you. Now you see it for what it truly is, a birthright. Not something you earn by pleasing others, but something you claim by honoring yourself. And when you live from that truth, your world expands in ways you couldn't have imagined. Picture yourself at a crossroads. Behind you is the well-worn path you've walked for years. You know every twist, every stone, every shadow. It's familiar. It's safe. Ahead of you are several roads, some winding, some steep, some disappearing into the mist. None of them are guaranteed. And yet, there's a pull in your chest, a whisper in your bones. This is the way forward. You take a step, and then another. You don't need to see the whole path to know it's yours. One of the great truths of Gate 4 is that choosing yourself isn't about rejecting others. It's about rejecting the versions of yourself that you created to keep others comfortable. You no longer contort to fit spaces that were never meant to hold you. You no longer dilute your voice so it doesn't echo too loudly in someone else's small room. You walk with the knowledge that your presence will be too much for some. And that's exactly how it should be. There's a liberation that comes when you understand that the people meant for you will not just tolerate your fullest self, they will celebrate it. They will not shrink away from your fire. They will warm their hands by it. And if someone chooses to walk away when you stand in your truth, you stop seeing it as abandonment. You see it as alignment. Sagittarius, this is also where your natural optimism becomes your greatest asset. Instead of focusing on what you might lose, you begin to imagine what you might gain. New relationships built on mutual respect. Opportunities that align with your values. Experiences that light you up from the inside out. You start to live as if the world is conspiring in your favor. And in many ways, it begins to. The most profound part of this stage is that you no longer define success by external validation. You measure it in moments of deep alignment, in mornings where you wake up excited, in nights where you fall asleep knowing you stayed true to yourself. You start asking different questions. Not will they approve, but will this make my soul expand? I've seen this shift countless times with Sagittarius souls. It's the moment they stop bending their lives into shapes that fit other people's expectations and start shaping their lives around their own joy, purpose, and truth. And without fail, they tell me the same thing. It's not that my life suddenly became perfect. It's that I finally feel alive in it. In Gate 4, you reclaim authorship of your story. You stop editing out the parts that feel too bold, too strange, too ambitious. You write in your own voice, in your own rhythm, trusting that the right readers, the right companions, will find their way to your pages. And here's the quiet miracle. Once you begin this self-chosen journey, the fear that once kept you small starts to dissolve. Not because the risks vanish, but because you've built the muscle to face them. You've walked through the uncertainty and discovered you can survive it. More than that, you can thrive in it. So Sagittarius, Gate 4 is not the end of the story. It's the doorway. And you are stepping through it not because someone pushed you, not because life forced you, but because you finally chose yourself first. Conclusion. The day you chose yourself was the day everything changed. Sagittarius, when you look back, you'll see that the greatest turning point of your life wasn't marked by a dramatic ending or a grand beginning. It was marked by a quiet, personal decision, the moment you stopped asking who might be disappointed and started asking who you would become if you kept postponing yourself. That was the day you stepped out of the invisible trap, the one built not of walls, but of compromises and silences that slowly dimmed your fire. You'll remember the version of you who accepted good enough, just to avoid rocking the boat, who kept dreams in a locked drawer because you feared they might scare someone away. You'll hold them with compassion, not shame, because that version of you was doing their best with the tools they had. But now you've built new tools, courage, clarity, self-trust, and you know how to use them. This new chapter doesn't promise a life without challenge. Choosing yourself will still invite moments of doubt. And yes, there will be people who step out of your life when you no longer fit the shape they preferred. But here's what's different now. You no longer see those departures as losses. You see them as the natural pruning that allows your soul to grow in the direction it's meant to. You will find new connections that meet you at your full height. People who are not intimidated by your dreams but inspired by them. You will take opportunities not because they're safe, but because they set something inside you alight. You will speak more honestly, love more deeply, and create more fearlessly, because the foundation you're standing on is finally your own truth, not someone else's comfort zone. And perhaps the most liberating part? You realize that the world did not collapse when you stopped shrinking. The sky did not fall when you raised your voice. Instead, the horizon widened. Doors you never saw before began to appear. Life began to feel less like something you endured, and more like something you were actively shaping. So, Sagittarius, here's the truth. The trap ends where you choose yourself first. This is not selfishness. This is sovereignty. You were born to be expansive, to chart unknown territories, to bring your light to places where it has never been. And you cannot do that by staying small for the sake of comfort. If this resonates with you, let it be your reminder. You have always held the key. You can open the door today, and the life that waits on the other side is not just bigger. It's yours. And as we close this conversation, I want you to take a moment to breathe in this truth. Your freedom doesn't begin when someone else says, go. It begins when you do. So if your heart is ready, take that first step. The world is wide and it's waiting for you.